What happened?
These people are trying to kill me.
A panicked cry for help rang out in the middle of the night through an emergency call that lasted more than 20 minutes. On the other end of the line was a young woman gasping for breath, her voice trembling, repeating the phrase over and over as she ran past the beach houses, knocking on doors in desperation. That was the last time anyone heard her voice. Shannan Gilbert, 23, from New Jersey, was a young, energetic, and ambitious person. On the night of May 1st, 2010, she went to Oak Beach, a secluded residential area on the coast of Long Island, to meet a client who had made an appointment. From the moment she entered that house, all traces of her gradually became vague and uneasy. No one could have expected that such a seemingly normal trip would open the door to a series of unsolved mysteries. And it was Shannan Gilbert's 911 call, in the dark, in a sea of fear and survival instinct, that became the starting point for an investigation that has shocked America. But what drove her to flee in panic? Who was she hiding from? And why did the clues she left behind lead police to a series of more chilling discoveries on the once peaceful and isolated Gilgo Beach? The story of Shannan Gilbert is more than a disappearance. It is a haunting reminder of the secrets that can lurk in even the safest of communities. On the night of April 30th to May 1st, 2010, Shannan Gilbert booked an appointment through an online advertisement with a client named Joseph Brewer, who lived in the Oak Beach, Long Island residential area. This is a secluded, gated coastal area populated primarily by retirees and private individuals. Shannan was accompanied by her chauffeur, Michael Pack, who often drove her to appointments and waited outside. At around 2 a.m., Shannan entered Brewer's home. At first, things seemed normal, but after a short time, the atmosphere in the house began to change. According to Brewer's testimony, Shannan became anxious and spoke incoherently, as if she was afraid of something unknown. He asked Michael Pack to take her away, but Shannan refused to leave the house, then suddenly ran from the scene. At 4 a.m., the Suffolk County 911 Dispatch Center received an unusually long call. More than 20 minutes from a young woman, her voice filled with panic and confusion. She kept saying that someone was trying to kill her, but she couldn't say clearly where she was. The whispers were interspersed with footsteps, the sound of the ocean breeze, and her rapid breathing. Shannan ran along the beach road, knocking on several doors. A couple said they heard knocking and screaming for help, but because it was still dark and they didn't know what was happening, they didn't answer. Another neighbor saw a girl running across the yard, but thought it was someone drunk or having personal problems. Michael Pack tried to find Shannan, driving around the area. He saw her briefly near the lawn, then she disappeared into the darkness. After she was last seen, Shannan walked across a patch of wasteland adjacent to the swamp and was never seen again. The 911 call ended in silence. No police or ambulances were dispatched immediately due to the vague location and unclear nature of the call. The next morning, no one knew where Shannan was. The family called the driver and the passenger back, but received only disjointed, incoherent answers. No one expected that leaving a house that night would lead to a months-long search and eventually reveal a shocking secret about a series of other victims in this quiet coastal area. Soon after Shannan went missing, bystanders began reporting the incident to authorities. Michael Pack, who had driven her to Oak Beach, was the first to speak up, describing the unusual circumstances of the night and how he had been unable to find her after she had suddenly run away. Joseph Brewer, the homeowner, also reported that Shannan had left his residence in an unsteady and unexplained state. However, the initial efforts of the police to find Shannan Gilbert were not as urgent as expected. The reason was that many agencies believed that this was simply a runaway or a personal situation with no obvious signs of crime. Her family, especially her mother, Mary Gilbert, did not accept this passive approach. With a strong feeling that her daughter was in danger, she proactively contacted the press, convincing the police to expand the investigation and organize a search. The tireless efforts eventually paid off, but they opened a terrifying door. In December 2010, while patrolling the Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, a police officer stumbled upon a skeleton wrapped in a burlap sack. Before the victim could be identified, police expanded their search, and within days, 3 more bodies were discovered in a similar manner, also wrapped and hidden in bushes along the road. The victims were all young women who had previously advertised their services online and worked as freelancers. Their identities were quickly established: Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. The press dubbed them the Gilgo Four. The discovery of 4 bodies in quick succession in the same area, with nearly identical methods of concealment, completely changed the direction of the investigation. What had once been a personal disappearance had become a serious serial murder case, with national media attention. Police immediately cordoned off the area, deployed dogs, surveillance aircraft, and forensic teams to continue searching Gilgo Beach and surrounding wastelands. But as the volume of information grew, a terrifying truth began to emerge. This was no longer the story of a missing girl, but the beginning of a series of haunting, unsolved crimes that had lasted for years. While other victims were identified, the question of Shannan Gilbert remained unanswered. Where was she? Was she one of the victims of the same killer? Or was her case completely separate? All sorts of theories were raised, and the public began to closely follow every step of the investigation. After more than a year of being missing without a trace, in December 2011, searchers discovered Shannan Gilbert's remains in a dense swamp area, just a few hundred meters from where she was last seen. The surrounding landscape suggested that her body had been there for a long time, severely affected by environmental factors such as water, mud, and wild vegetation. The location of the body was scattered, with some of the bones no longer intact. Personal items such as clothing and a phone were also found nearby, allowing authorities to confirm her identity. However, there were no obvious signs of assault, struggle, or use of a weapon at the scene, which made the case even more complicated. The Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office concluded that the cause of death was likely related to being trapped in a muddy environment and hypothermia. However, Shannan's family was not satisfied with that conclusion. They requested an independent autopsy from renowned forensic pathologist Michael Baden. In additional analysis, Baden found damage to the hyoid bone, a feature often associated with strangulation. While it cannot be conclusive, it is a strong indication that Shannan did not die naturally as initially believed. The question of what really happened to her continues to be a mystery that many people struggle with. When Shannan Gilbert went missing, investigators initially treated it as a typical missing person case. Her work as a lone wolf in the 911 call did not immediately indicate a crime. Police initially theorized that she may have gotten lost or been in a state of panic due to psychological or drug-induced reasons. However, the shocking discoveries made just a few months later forced investigators to change their approach. As more bodies of women were discovered along the Gilgo Beach Highway, a connection emerged. All had posted online to find clients, had gone missing under similar circumstances, and their bodies had been disposed of in similar ways, hidden in sacks and placed in close proximity to each other. The coincidence was no longer a coincidence, and police were forced to consider the theory of a serial killer operating for a long time without being detected. The scale of the case brought together multiple federal and state agencies. They began analyzing call records, tracking vehicles that had entered and exited the area, and checking records of individuals who had behaved suspiciously in the past. For years, the case seemed to be at a standstill, with no specific suspects emerging with enough evidence. However, a major breakthrough came in 2022 when new genetic analysis technology allowed for the testing of samples that had been stored for years. A hair found in a sack containing the body of a victim had previously been unusable due to the limitations of the technology at the time. With whole genome sequencing, the sample could now be traced with high accuracy. In parallel with the forensic process, the investigation team also used data analysis from cell towers, a technique that helped determine the area where the suspect's phone had been. Signals in the Gilgo Beach area around the time the victims went missing showed that a device had been repeatedly spotted around the scene. After combining information from subscriber data, suspicious calls, and vehicle descriptions, the police began to focus their attention on a man named Rex Heuermann. Heuermann was an architect with offices in Manhattan and a residence in Massapequa Park, just a few miles from the crime scene. In addition to his unassuming appearance, he had no criminal record and lived a quiet life with his family. What drew the police to him was a series of records showing that Heuermann's phone had been used to call several of the victims under false names while they were still alive. The calls were made from locations near his home or office. In July 2023, after months of close surveillance, the police decided to arrest Rex Heuermann. Search warrants were executed at both his residence and his workplace. They seized computers, hard drives, electronic devices, notes, and personal items. Some of the most notable evidence was hair samples, some of which matched the DNA found on the victims' bodies. Heuermann's arrest created a wave of intense media and public interest. He was quickly charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, including in the deaths of the Gilgo 4 victims: Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, Megan Waterman, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Evidence included DNA, location data, online behavior, and witnesses who had seen him before the victims went missing. Although the investigation into Shannan Gilbert's death has not yet resulted in any direct charges against Heuermann, investigators continue to analyze the possibility of a connection. The panicked 911 call she made that night, which lasted more than 22 minutes, is still considered a key clue. Her words, the sounds around her, the voices of others, all were extracted, processed, and compared to determine whether a suspect was present in the situation. One point of contention is that Shannan's body was discovered not in the same area as the Gilgo 4, but near the house where she fled. This has led some experts to believe that she may have died in an accident while trying to escape something, rather than being directly murdered. However, the injuries to her body, particularly to her neck, along with the state of fear recorded in the call, continue to keep investigators from ruling out any theories. The Suffolk County prosecutor confirmed that the process of collecting and analyzing evidence is still ongoing and has not ruled out further charges if warranted. Police also continue to urge anyone with information about the night of the incident or other victims who have not yet been identified to contact them to assist in the investigation. The case of Shannan Gilbert, although it began with a seemingly isolated call, has led to the uncovering of a crime network that spans years. While no final conclusions have been reached for each part of this complex case, ongoing investigative efforts are gradually bringing the truth to light, in the hope of not only finding justice for the victims, but also restoring faith in justice for the survivors. After his arrest in July 2023, Rex Heuermann appeared in Suffolk County Court for preliminary hearings. He has not yet been formally tried by jury. Instead, the legal system is undergoing a series of pretrial hearings, where lawyers, prosecutors, and judges discuss the admissibility of evidence, the scope of the charges, and how future trials will be conducted. One of the most hotly debated issues is whether the cases should be tried together or separately for each victim. The prosecution argues that the similarities between the cases, the method of the crime, the victim population, and the physical evidence, warrant a consolidated prosecution. Heuermann's defense team, meanwhile, argued that a joint trial would make it difficult for the jury to be impartial to the specific circumstances. At the same time, the parties also face questions about the use of modern DNA testing techniques. The use of advanced genetic sequencing technology to analyze hairs collected at the scene is a complex legal issue. The defense argues that the process is not completely standardized and could lead to errors. The court is considering whether to allow this evidence to be presented to the jury. Although Heuermann is currently only charged in cases involving a group of confirmed victims, the name Shannan Gilbert has always been at the center of the debate. Her family, especially her late mother, Mari Gilbert, have been speaking out for years to expand the investigation and include Shannan's death in the same prosecution. However, Shannan's case has so far not been confirmed to have any direct legal connection to Heuermann. The public has been closely following every move in court, and the press has been covering every hearing, although it has not been recorded live due to New York State regulations. Many locals, especially those on Long Island, are hopeful that the upcoming trial will not only shed light on the truth about the identified victims, but also clarify the fate of Shannan, who inadvertently sparked the entire investigation with her own cry for help. An official date for the trial has not yet been announced, but all signs point to the case being one of the most riveting legal events in the country in recent years. When the courtroom doors open, questions that have lingered for more than a decade may be answered. Shannan Gilbert left home one night like any other, never to return. Her late-night call for help was not only a desperate last words, but also a catalyst that opened a dark mystery that had been buried under the sands of Long Island. What seemed like an isolated disappearance gradually revealed a series of crimes that spanned years, with nameless victims and unspoken pain. Although many clues have been exposed, although Rex Heuermann has been arrested and is facing justice, the biggest question still has no definitive answer. Who really made Shannan Gilbert forever unable to return? The case not only shows the harshness of a society in which many people are easily forgotten because of their living conditions or occupations, it also challenges how the legal system responds to the initial weak calls for help. If it had acted faster, what could have been different? Amidst all the facts, convictions, and investigations, there remains a void called truth, and that makes us wonder, how many other calls like Shannan's are still being left unanswered? What do you think? Is justice enough?